This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show, where we celebrate the role players and the underdogs in sports. And those underdogs, that's what we're going to be talking about today, because our Moonlighter is a guy by the name of Tyler O'Shea. Tyler O'Shea, he's not related to Danny or Kevin O'Shea from the movie Little Giants. I actually asked him about that in the interview, but he runs a podcast, or not a podcast, a website called jokermag.com. If you go to jokermag.com, you'll see that they proclaim to be the home of the underdog. Well, here on the Moonlight Graham Show, we have always claimed that we are the podcast that is the home of the underdog. So there's obviously an alignment of interests. There's like-minded people here between Tyler and myself here on the Moonlight Graham Show. And so we're bringing Tyler O'Shea onto the podcast. Number one, we got to talk about Brock Purdy, underdog story, Mr. Irrelevant in the NFL, went out and beat Tom Brady this past weekend and looked great doing it. Great underdog story that I thought we had to get more of a national reaction from Tyler over at the Joker Mag to comment on that. But I also wanted to have Tyler break down what are the top 5 underdog stories in sports in this year. We're, believe it or not, we are wrapping up 2022. And Tyler, they do a great job of not only looking at football or basketball, but every sport that's out there and the really, really great underdog story, similar to what we're trying to do here on the podcast. And he lists out the top 5 underdogs from this calendar year. I think it's pretty fun. And as we are dropping this episode, this is our 270th episode, guys. If you've been following from the beginning, then you have been following since December 13th of 2016. That's right. Today, on our 270th episode, today is our 6-year anniversary of the Moonlight Graham Show. So thank you guys for following on episode 270. For those of you, the few that have been following since day one, thank you as well. It's kind of a special anniversary. Every anniversary is a special. Not many podcasts really make it past a year, make it past 2 years. Not many have made it 270 episodes. That's something that I am proud of. And I just want to shout out to all you out there, the Moonlighters that have been listening, whether you jumped on since day one or you jumped on a year ago or you jumped on after that Big Field of Dreams episode we did a couple of years ago. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the podcast. Thank you for supporting the role players and the underdogs. Special shout out to the Moonlight Graham Show team, Brian Sandvig, Brendan Gargano, Tommy Griffin, my brothers Andy and Neil. They've been a big help all along the way, along with yours truly. So enjoy today's episode with Tyler O'Shea, the head of Joker Mag, the home of the underdog on the internet. Check him out. I think you'll like this episode, and I hope you have a great week. Moonlighters, are you or someone you know moving down to Kansas City? Well, if you are, the one realtor that we trust and yet you need to be calling is the great Brian Sandvig. As you well know, Brian Sandvig is our producer here on the podcast, and there is not a better residential real estate advisor down in the Kansas City marketplace than Brian Sandvig. Call Brian Sandvig, shoot him a text. Hey, DM us on social media. We'll get you connected with Brian if you can't find him on all the socials, but he is there and he is active, and he is your Kansas City realtor, so give him a call. All right, Tyler O'Shea, Joker Mag, the guy that's all about the underdogs, just like we are here on the Moonlight Graham Show. Tyler, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Tim. It's been a while, and it's great to reconnect and be on here.
Why underdogs?
It's just something I've always been passionate about. I was actually cut from the baseball team in 7th grade. I was searching the internet at the time for stories of players who, were undersized, guys like Dustin Pedroia, Tim Lincecum, David Eckstein. I used to look up to those guys because I was always so small compared to other kids in my grade and my age. And it was just kind of a symbol of hope for me, of seeing what these guys can accomplish, make it all the way to the pro level and succeed. And it just kind of gave me that hope and that inspiration for the future. So that's why I kind of want to pass it on to the next generation and inspire them to succeed as well through these stories.
I was actually expecting the answer to be, the Little Giants.
Mm-hmm.
The Little Giants, you got Danny and Kevin O'Shea, one of the great underdog sports movies of our childhoods. And, you're an O'Shea yourself. I figured you just resonated with Danny O'Shea.
It's a great film, great movie. Not the exact inspiration, but an incredible film for sure.
So the big underdog story in Iowa this past week and really across the NFL has been Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy was a guy that Iowa State fans and college football fans in the state of Iowa, we've been following for a long time here. I'll be completely honest. I didn't think he was an NFL quality quarterback coming out of college. I was surprised he even got drafted. I was not surprised he ended up on an NFL team, but for the fact that he's been on the active roster all season as the last guy drafted, I think was a win in any regard for this year for him. And now to see what the last 2 weeks have been like for that guy, it's pretty incredible. But does he resonate? Does Brock Purdy resonate on the national scale when we're talking underdogs for you, Tyler?
Definitely. I mean, the last guy selected in the draft, you look at his college numbers, not mind-blowing in any way, but just what he's been able to accomplish in a short period of time and the confidence that he's gotten from his teammates and the media and his coaches. I saw a little interview of what Trent Williams had to say about him, and it was just incredible for one of the best left tackles in the entire league to be talking about him in such a respected way. Really says a lot about him.
Now, it's interesting about Purdy, and I wonder if this is true of most underdogs, that you got to win the clubhouse first. And it seems like Purdy has done that. Like he's won over his teammates because ultimately, especially if you're an underdog in a team sport, you got to get the rest of the team to rally around you because you're only one guy. And that's what's cool about the Purdy story is it's very clearly that the rest of the team is rallying around Brock Purdy. They've got a good defense. They've got a good offense. They've got a great coaching staff. He's only one of the 22 starters on that team, but everybody else is really lifting him up. And because he's already won the team over by competing hard in practice, being a good guy in the locker room, everybody's really, really happy for him. So often you get like a backup quarterback coming in and it creates controversy amongst the team over like, who's the guy? And we don't seem to have that with Purdy. And I think that's a big factor of like being a successful underdog.
Definitely. And it takes me back to, as a Philly guy, Nick Foles, just the way the team played and rallied under him. It was just a testament to his leadership. And now what you're seeing in Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts compared to Purdy, I mean, they're both young guys. They know how to rally the troops. They know how to get the veterans and the young guys behind them. And just the team plays so much better under guys that they trust and they love to play with.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of Rudy. So the more you read about Rudy, the more you realize like the guys that were on the team, most of them were mocking him and they carried him off the field kind of in mockery. And most of them like kind of just hated having him around and he was annoying to them. And that story has been, glamorized and Hollywoodized and Disneyfied and all that stuff. The story is still incredible. And I'm still a Rudy guy and I still love everything about what that story is. But you talk to guys like Joe Montana who are on the team and they're just like, oh my God, are we still talking about Rudy? Purdy seems like the opposite, right? Purdy is like everybody on the team wants this guy to succeed. And it wasn't just this sideshow thing. And I always find that interesting of like when you have some scrappy walk-on type underdog dude, it's like, what does the rest of the team think about this guy? And typically the older I've gotten, I follow where the team falls because I feel like the locker room really knows and you can't lie to the locker room.
Yeah. And having a background in sports too, I'm sure it helps you kind of relate to that of like, if there's a teammate you don't enjoy playing with, it's going to show on the field one way or another. So it's something that kind of gets overlooked in the media when they talk about different teams. It's like, yeah, they're professionals and they have to play together, but like, wanting to play together definitely is a factor.
Right. Yeah. The media, can take a story wherever they want. Right. And they can build a narrative around whatever they want. And I'm always interested like the real story about it. So I guess going back to you being an underdog and you wanting to create an outlet for underdogs, you get cut from the 7th grade baseball team. Did you ever go back out or was that it for you?
So I did. That day, like, still just sticks in my brain. I know it sounds silly, but I was 12 or 13 years old at the time, and it was just like a pivotal moment in my life, because I could have given up. I could have taken the easy way and said, maybe I'll find a different sport. But for me, baseball was always it. It was what my father instilled in us, and me and my brother always played baseball. So I said, all right, I'm going to find kind of some inspiration. So I remember reading articles about Tim Lincecum, about Dustin Pedroia, like I said, guys that at the time that were getting popular in the sport. And it just kind of motivated me hearing about them and seeing how small they were and how small they still were as pro athletes and being able to succeed. So the next year I played 8th grade baseball, was a backup, kind of worked my way up over the years. Freshman team, JV baseball, 10th grade, and then varsity in my final 2 years, and ended up playing Division III baseball at McDaniel College in Maryland. So just kind of being able to overcome an early hurdle is kind of what helps me relate to these underdogs in the sport today.
For sure. And baseball is that sport too, where the body type doesn't matter ultimately, right? Like you mentioned it with Eckstein and Altuve and Pedroia and Lincecum. Like baseball is that sport where you can get an Aaron Judge and a Jose Altuve playing the same position maybe and batting the same spot in the order. And it's just a funny sport like that, where it's just, if you can produce, you can produce. Other sports, which I know you've talked about a lot on your website, it's like, you know, you have a breakdown of the average height of each position in the NBA, right? And that's kind of the way NBA and NFL are. It's like, if you're 7 foot tall, you're going to play center in the NBA, right? Like 30% of the 7-footers in the world play professional basketball or some crazy stat like that. Baseball, it's like you can be Randy Johnson at 6'10" and a half, or you can be Tim Lincecum at 5'7", and you play the same percentage and both be multi-Cy Young winners. And that's the beauty of baseball. And one of the reasons why, you know, guys like you and I, who, you know, we're both probably living our whole lives under 6 foot, that's why we gravitate towards that game, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it's awesome to see even guys, different body types, like you said, like Alejandro Kirk with Toronto, and Williams Astudillo, however you say his name, with
the
Minnesota.
Turtle, man. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just cool to see. I mean, like you said, different body types, different backgrounds, they all come together on the field. And if you can play, you can play. That's what I love about baseball.
I got to imagine you're a Chase Utley guy then, right?
That's my number one favorite player ever.
Really?
I always kind of modeled my game after Chase Utley. Yeah, just the hustling on and off the field, and just really being a hard-nosed player. Kind of prided myself in playing like Chase Utley growing up.
I always loved how he obviously like took a shower before the game, like after BP. So he always had like the slicked back hair going, you know?
Yeah.
And just, yeah, he like looked good in the uniform, but at the same time, he was that Charlie Hustle type too, where he was always dirty, always filthy, but like carried it well. It's like, man, I want to look like Chase Utley out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't see many pros like bust it down the line on every single play and hustle on and off the field like he did. So yeah, it's kind of a missing piece of today's game, I would say, but something that I think should make a comeback.
I didn't think about this before, but I just thought about it while I was thinking of the Phillies. Do you remember that story from when they won the World Series with Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley, and they had Roy Halladay, and there was that guy that snuck on the field and was part of the trophy celebration? Do you remember that story?
I didn't hear that story, no.
You'll have to look it up, and I guess this is a bad podcast. I was expecting my Philly guy to be able to take it. I think Rick Riley in Sports Illustrated did an article on this guy, so you have to look it up. But I kind of want to find that guy now, and you guys maybe should find him for your website or for our podcast. He snuck onto the field and just like put a shirt on, like World Championship shirt and the hat, and just partied with the team, and everybody thought he was like a minority owner of the team. And it was a really great article in Sports Illustrated, but we should try to find that guy.
You're right. Rick Riley. He covered that 2009. Yeah. I just found the article. Awesome. I'll have to look that up. That'd be a good interview. Interesting interview.
If you can find him. All right. So you guys are the kings of the underdogs, right? We do a pretty good job on it with the podcast here, but we can get kind of local, right? We can do a lot of Iowa-based, Midwestern-based stories, and sometimes we lose sight of the national, the global underdogs. And I think that's why I love reading your website, getting your newsletter on a weekly basis, because it really fills me in on what else is going on there in the world of underdogs. So, Tyler, the task I've put you with is the top 5 underdog stories of 2022. Right? We're wrapping up 2022 here. You are the guy. You are the guy to go to for this. So what's your number 5 underdog story of 2022?
Ooh, I have to put them in order. Okay. So number 1, I would say, or number 5, I would say Josh Jacobs. He's the NFL's leading rusher right now. He had zero stars on every college recruiting website in high school. He had no social media presence. He actually had a really tough upbringing as well. He grew up jumping from motel to motel, kind of sleeping in a car with his father, and some rough neighborhoods and stuff like that. Just really came from a very tough upbringing, and look at where he is now, at the top of all NFL running backs.
So this brings up an interesting point. And I love Josh Jacobs. I don't know why. I think it was because I got into the Raiders really briefly when Gruden took over again and they were on Hard Knocks. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to watch the Raiders more this year. But where do you draw the line on being an underdog if a guy went to Alabama?
Yeah. I mean,
how do you draw that line?
It's a great point. I feel like every player in some way has some type of adversity that they've overcame. And I mean, the fact that making the leap from high school of being a 0-star recruit to me, and then ending up at Alabama and becoming a first-round pick in the NFL. And then even in the NFL, he was kind of overlooked and doubted. People kind of put him on the back burner when they're talking about the best young running back. So I do consider Jacobs kind of an underdog still to this day.
How did he end up at Bama if he was a 0-star recruit?
That's a great question. I totally do not have the answer to that.
All right. Well,
I mean, so from what I know and from what I understand, I'm actually working on a profile of him right now, but he had no social following at all. And I think his high school coach helped him build that out going into his senior year. And that's when he got the interest from major schools. But until then, it was like he was shattering records in high school, and coaches would not even believe the statistics because he had no following. They didn't know who he was. They never heard of him.
Yeah, that's kind of like the Purdy story too. Like Brock Purdy was very under recruited because he was hurt as a junior. So all of his recruiting happened later. Yep. And then Iowa State got on board. And then actually Alabama once again came in late and offered Purdy as well. So that's kind of one of those underdog stories. Once you dig a little bit deeper, you're like, oh, this guy's actually pretty legit. He's got good pedigree. Mm-hmm. All right. Number four, Tyler. I like that. I read your Josh Jacobs. You had like a tweet thread or something about it a couple of weeks ago, and I read that and I liked it at the time. So what's your number 4?
So I'll say number 4, Jose Cuas, the relief pitcher for the Kansas City Royals. He was actually delivering packages for FedEx, and I had a nice little thread about him earlier in the year that did pretty well, but just amazing. I mean, he kind of was out of the sport for a while, I believe, and he would play catch with his brother under the lights of a local field after, delivering packages all day for FedEx. And now, he's an MLB relief pitcher.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but he was in like Queens, New York, right?
Yep.
And he was delivering packages for FedEx or for Amazon, and his older brother, and they were playing in like that Dominican league in New York. Yep. That's pretty famous with a bunch of ex-pro guys. And it's a really good league of good baseball that happens in the 5 boroughs there. And his older brother wasn't there something like his brother would not let him not go a day without working out. Yeah. And it's like, he had an older brother who was like, hey dude, 10 o'clock at night, 1 a.m, whenever it is that you get done work, you wake me up and I'll work out with you. I'll be your catch partner because I want to make sure that this talent that you have doesn't go wasted.
Exactly. Yeah. His brother was a huge part of his story. And also K-Rod, actually, Francisco Rodriguez. He met up with him, I think, in the Dominican Winter League. And K-Rod was the one that got him to drop down to a sidearm kind of submarine delivery. And that's kind of what catapulted him to becoming a major league prospect.
How did he get picked up out of that New York league? Do you know?
I honestly don't know. He was actually an infielder for University of Maryland. So he converted to a pitcher later on. And that's kind of where that was kind of the catalyst for him, was talking to K-Rod and kind of getting that advice. Because the story is he was messing around in warmups, just like all of us baseball players do, kind of dropping it down to a sidearm or submarine. And K-Rod was like, I see something there. You should stick with that. And it worked out.
Is there any part of you as an ex-baseball player that might be playing in your men's league? I'm like, hey man, if I discover a knuckleball tonight, like maybe that's my ticket. There's still hope. There's still a chance.
There's always hope. There's always a chance. I was playing men's league baseball for a little while. I kind of got away from it now with work and everything being so busy. But yeah, I still love the game, and I would love to, keep playing at a competitive level.
I like that one. So both of those were two that I had on my list just because I'm a Joker Mag guy, right? So I was aware of those. So what's your number 3 now?
Number 3, I'm going to give it a recent guy, Mike White for the Jets. He actually didn't start until his senior year of high school. And now, kind of some hit or miss success with the Jets, but he is the starter in New York. So pretty incredible that he came from not even starting until his senior year in high school, when most guys are already committed to a big school or, already kind of have their future laid out for him. He wasn't even the starter at that point.
And what I like about Mike White is obviously when you're going up against like one of the top picks of the draft, like a Zach Wilson, who's like, model good looks. He had that throw pre-draft. Remember when he was rolling to his left that everybody just freaked out on for like months. It's like, is Zach Wilson the greatest quarterback prospect we've ever seen? ? And, after something like that, you just got to cheer for the backup, right? Because if this guy that's got all the tools, all the looks, all the money, all everything, and then this Mike White guy who literally everybody knows like 15 guys named Mike White. Like if the average person looks in their cell phone and like, look at your mics in your phone, there's probably 2 or 3 of them named Mike White. And then he beats out Zach Wilson, who's supposed to be all world. I think everybody's cheering for Mike White.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Yeah. I mean, it's the total opposite ends of the spectrum, right? It's like the guy, like you just said, it's the pretty boy guy who's the top pick versus the guy that's kind of unheralded, older, 27 years old and just coming in when no one really expects him to. And I mean, last year he dominated too when he came in and played, I think against the Bengals, he threw for like over 400 yards. It was just ridiculous.
And I'm just looking it up now. Mike White played his first 2 college years at South Florida and his last 2 years at Western Kentucky.
Yep.
And I looked it up. I didn't know this beforehand. And I was like, man, should I know? Should I remember Mike White from somewhere? And then the answer is no. Like I'm not following Western Kentucky football.
Yeah.
At all. and not many people are. All right. Those are the 3 good ones so far. So I'm guessing your top 2 got to be the best yet then. The top 2 underdog stories of 2022.
So I'm going to mix it up a little bit here. I have to represent for Division III. Since I was a D3 guy myself, I'm going to bring out a name, Nicholas Morrow for the Chicago Bears, former D3 guy who is now one of the leaders of the Bears defense. Kind of an up and down year for the Bears, but he's a guy who came from a school, Greenville University, which is a school with only 872 students, Division III college, and he was the first player from his school to ever sign an NFL contract, and now to be the anchor of the Bears defense. Pretty long, successful journey for him. That's
incredible. And I've never heard of him. And every year there's like 1 or 2 guys in the NFL draft drafted out of D3. Mm-hmm. Typically they're out of like Mount Union, or you'll see like St. John's or St. Thomas in Minnesota that will get a guy every now and again. How often? Is this something you're tracking on an annual basis? Like, do you guys put out, hey, here are the D2, D3 guys drafted in the NFL draft this year?
We do. We actually keep a running list of D3 guys in the NFL, D3 guys in the MLB. We do D2, JUCO, NAIA even. So we just love to keep track of that kind of stuff.
So from that point, like how many, and you don't have to have the exact number, but how many D3 guys are in the MLB, the NFL, and I'm sure there's probably nobody in the NBA. Well, I guess who's the guy that went to Michigan, went to Williams College, and then
Yes. Duncan Robinson.
Yeah. Duncan Robinson was a D3 guy for 2 years. So I guess there is one in the NBA. But do you have those updated numbers?
I don't have the exact numbers. I could pull them up right now, but you'd be surprised, honestly, of how many guys there are in the MLB at least. Let's see. Colin McHugh, we have Tim Lincecum, Josh Fleming with the Rays, Kevin Herget with the Rays as well. The Rays are always finding these gem guys. Casey Lawrence, Steven Ridings, who I actually faced in my college careers with the Yankees system. Billy Wagner was actually a D3 guy. Joe Nathan, Eric Kratz, a bunch of others. Jordan Zimmerman, Chris Coast, who we interviewed. Bruce Maxwell, the former catcher, Charlie Furbish, Chris Heisey, a lot of former guys. And then, there's always a mix of current guys being called up in September and throughout the year.
I forgot that Joe Nathan was a D3 guy. I've actually got about 5 feet from me right now. He's got his Twins Hall of Fame bobblehead because I'm a Twins guy. And I believe he was a shortstop, right? And he was drafted and played a couple of years in the Giants system as like a 6'4" shortstop before somebody's like, hey man, why don't you try pitching? That might be a good idea for you. And then of course he's the all-time saves leader for the Minnesota Twins right now. Awesome. Yep. That's cool.
So you want to go to number one?
That's what I'm waiting on.
This is not going to be a number one from this year. This is my number one that I've ever found in my entire life. I'm going to go with Sam Mills, Division III to the NFL. I honestly was ignorant to his story until recently, and just absolutely incredible what he overcame. He was actually kind of gave it up after trying out for the NFL, got cut multiple times, tried out for the CFL, got cut multiple times. He was a Division III guy. Everyone overlooked him. He was undersized, 5'9" linebacker, and actually spent some time after getting cut from those leagues teaching, going back to becoming a high school teacher in New Jersey, and kind of gave it up. And that's when the USFL came out, recruited him, word got around, and became an NFL, legendary player and Hall of Famer.
Yeah. So recently, maybe a couple of months ago, I read the Football for a Buck USFL book by Jeff Pearlman. Have you read that one?
No, I haven't. I have to though.
It's good. I think I've read every Jeff Pearlman book now. I just binged, like 10 of them in a row within the past year here. The most recent was that Bo Jackson book. But before I read the Bo Jackson book, I read the Football for a Buck, and it's a good book. There's a whole chapter on it on Sam Mills. And I was familiar with Sam Mills because I think I watched his my football life or something at some point years back, but I did not know the USFL piece of it. And that's when I learned what you just told me about Sam Mills, where by the time he was trying out with the USFL, he was substitute teacher, cut everywhere. He goes to the USFL tryouts where it's a mess of people and most of them stink. Nobody knows anybody's names. So teams are signing guys that had any NFL or CFL experience. Well, Mills at the tryout, the coaches get together after the tryout and they're like, you're not going to believe it, but this 5'9", I guess he says he plays linebacker, was the most impressive guy that we saw. Are we crazy for signing this guy to the USFL, who was essentially signing anybody and everybody at this time? And they're all like, no, we kind of all agree that he's the best player here, but they all thought they were going to be a laughing stock for suiting up this 5'9" guy who did not play major college football. Nobody had ever heard of him. And not only do they sign him, but for the 2 years that he plays in the USFL, he's literally the best defensive player on that team and arguably the best defensive player besides Reggie White in the entire league. Yep. And then he goes on to play for the Saints after that, and then for the Carolina Panthers when they come into the league as well. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, maybe I'm getting him and Mike Singletary, their look mixed up. I think Sam Mills played with glasses too.
Yeah, I believe he did. At
least in my head, when I picture him with the Mike Singletary big frame glasses on.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's the man behind the Carolina Panthers keep pounding phrase after a speech that he gave when he was a coach shortly before he passed away, unfortunately. But just, a phenomenal story, and just incredible, how sports can kind of transcend. It's a platform where people, it doesn't matter what background you came from, you can succeed. If you have the heart, you have the dedication, you have the motivation to keep pushing forward. And that's kind of what he embodied, was that keep pounding, just keep pounding, keep pushing forward and pursuing your goals.
I love it. The true story of the underdog right there, and how underdogs can transcend, right? Mm-hmm. To your point, there's something that you can take from the Sam Mills story, no matter what profession you're in, no matter what sport you like, no matter what you do in life, you can find something from the Sam Mills story that can inspire you or carry your passion forward. And that's what's so cool about Underdogs.
100%. That's what I love about it. And that's what, with the site, that's what we're trying to do. And I'm sure what you're doing with the Moonlight Graham show, it's the same thing. It's just trying to bring these stories to the forefront and shine a light on kind of the stuff that maybe, major outlets don't always cover and don't always give the attention that they deserve. And, kind of inspiring that next generation or anyone who's, maybe in a tough spot in their life.
What's the most popular article that you guys have ever done on the website?
So shortest NBA players was actually the one that's popped, just because, there's so much curiosity. Like you said, there's 7-footers everywhere you look in the NBA. And for guys like Muggsy Bogues, Earl Boykins to succeed, is just incredible. Earl Boykins, he's probably one of my favorite stories. His father used to sneak him into their gym in his little gym bag because he was so small and he didn't want to pay for a ticket for his son to get into the gym. And he would literally stuff him in his bag because he was so tiny. And then he ends up becoming, I think he played 14 or 15 years in the NBA or something like that.
Is that a real story?
That's a real story. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love every bit of that. We need to do it. That just reminded me, we need to do a podcast on that. We should do a podcast on that and just link your article in it. There's so much synergies between what you guys are doing and what we're doing here on the podcast, which is why it's so much fun to bring you on here. Tyler, how can people find what you're doing online?
Jokermag.com. That's where everything lives. That's where all these stories are. And you can sign up to our newsletter to keep up with all the latest stories. So it's just the Underdog newsletter. You'll find it under jokermag.com/newsletter.
Awesome. Tyler O'Shea, thanks for coming on the Moonlight Graham show, man. Love what you're doing for the Underdogs. Love what you're doing over at Joker Mag, and it's good to connect again.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to our episode with Tyler O'Shea from the Joker Mag. And I want to talk a little bit more about Brock Purdy, because if you guys have been listening for a while, you probably remember when we had Nick Clark on to do our NFL draft preview in the spring, I had some comments about Brock Purdy, and I will fully admit that I'm eating crow now. I was a huge fan of Brock Purdy in college at Iowa State. I remember when he took over the starting job from Jacob Park and he beat Oklahoma, and he was the best quarterback in Iowa State history. So it was fun to watch him. I rooted for him all along the way. I did not think he was an NFL quarterback. And I said that on the podcast when we did that NFL draft preview. Frankly, watching him at Iowa State, I just never thought he had the arm strength to play in the NFL. And that was one of his biggest negatives when he was going through the NFL draft process, which was, he's not a tremendous athlete. He's not super fast. He's not super tall. He doesn't have any of these skills that just pop off the page. And his arm strength, you can just tell when he throws the ball. He's not Justin Herbert out there. But it seems like he's gotten a lot better, obviously. And smarter people than me, Kyle Shanahan being one of them, found the right offense, the right mix to make it work for Brock Purdy in the NFL. And clearly, and I said this in the episode, but clearly his teammates love him. The system fits him. And you just got to tip your cap to a guy that comes in, without really playing all season and just fits right in and is not scared of the spotlight. And we saw that when he was at Iowa State. We're seeing it now in the NFL, and it's just a really cool story to follow. I didn't see this coming, and I'll admit that, but it's awesome to watch. Have a great week, Moonlighters. Thank you once again for listening since day one. This is episode 270. It's our 6-year anniversary. If you are still listening, shout us out on social media. Let us know what your favorite episode, out of all 270 we've done here on the Moonlight Graham Show, 6 years of doing it, what's your favorite podcast that we've done here? We'd love to hear from you. Have a great week, Moonlighters.
It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. It's a pretty good program, broadcasting to the heartland. Sports stories for the everyman. It's Moonlight Graham, yeah. Please follow us on Instagram. You're loving us on Twitter too. download every pod we do. It's Moonlight Graham.